When I found out my parents gave the family business to my sister, I stopped working 80-hour weeks for free. A week later, Dad called in panic over losing our biggest client. I just said, "Let Paula handle it. She's the heir, right?" They gave her the business like it was a birthday gift. No warning. No conversation. Just a quiet decision made behind my back. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stopped showing up and watched everything I built start to crumble. It was late. The kind of late where the office hums with silence and the only sound is the soft buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. I was still at my desk, surrounded by half-drunk coffee cups and a stack of contracts I'd been reviewing for hours. My back ached. My eyes burned. I was halfway through a vendor agreement when my phone lit up. She rarely called me at night. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice was cheerful, too cheerful. "We've decided Paula will be taking over the business," she said. Just like that. No build-up. No explanation. No room for discussion. I didn't ask why. I didn't argue. I just said, "Okay," and hung up. But inside something cracked. I sat there staring at the wall, the silence pressing down on me. I thought about the years I'd spent building this company. Weekends buried in spreadsheets, holidays skipped for client meetings, 80-hour weeks that blurred into months. I remembered the time I drove through a storm to deliver a proposal in person because the courier canceled. The nights I stayed up fixing inventory issues while everyone else slept. I had poured my life into this business. And now I was being replaced like a temp. The next morning I arrived early, hoping it had been a misunderstanding. Paula was already there. She was sitting at my desk sipping coffee from my mug, the chipped one I'd used for years. She smiled like nothing had changed. "Mom said you'd be okay with this," she said, flipping through a folder I'd left behind. I didn't respond. I just walked past her and sat at the conference table pretending to check emails. But I knew. I was no longer part of the plan. That week was a blur. Paula started making decisions without me. She scheduled meetings I wasn't invited to. Staff began looking to her for answers. Vendors called her directly. I became invisible in a space I had built from scratch. One afternoon I overheard her telling a junior manager, "We'll be restructuring soon. I'll explain more once I finalize things with Dad." Finalize? Restructure? I wasn't even in the conversation anymore. Friday came with a family dinner. I considered skipping it, but curiosity won. I arrived at my parents' house with a bottle of wine and a knot in my stomach. Paula greeted me at the door, dressed like she was heading to a board meeting. She hugged me lightly, then turned to welcome a neighbor who had dropped by. I stood there, forgotten. Dinner was tense. Dad talked about new beginnings and fresh leadership. Mom nodded along, beaming at Paula like she'd won a prize. At one point, Dad raised his glass and said, "To Paula, the future of our company." I looked around. No one met my eyes. I placed my fork down, folded my napkin, and quietly excused myself. I didn't wait for dessert. That night, I sat in my car outside my apartment for nearly an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the dashboard, replaying every moment from the past decade. The nights I stayed late to fix inventory issues. The weekends I spent training new hires. The times I covered for Paula when she didn't show up. I had given everything and now I was being erased. The next morning I walked into the office with a plan. I didn't announce anything. I didn't make a scene. I simply packed up my personal items, photos, notebooks, the mug Paula had used, and placed the office keys on the conference table. I left a note, "Thanks for the memories." Then I walked out. Monday felt strange. I woke up without an alarm. I made pancakes, something I hadn't done in years. I sat by the window watching the sun rise, sipping coffee slowly. But the peace didn't last. By noon I was checking emails, wondering if clients had noticed my absence. I worried about the staff, the deals in progress, the systems I had built. I felt guilty, like I had abandoned something I loved. But then I reminded myself, Paula's the heir. Let her handle it. That afternoon I received a message from Ravi, one of our senior managers. "Everything okay?" he asked. I replied, "Just taking a break." He didn't press. But I knew he sensed something was off. I spent the rest of the day cleaning my apartment, organizing old files, trying to distract myself. But every drawer I opened held reminders. Receipts from business trips, notes from strategy meetings, thank you cards from clients. My life had revolved around that company. And now I had to figure out who I was without it. That evening I walked to the park near my building. I sat on a bench watching kids play, couples stroll, dogs chase squirrels. Life moved on. I realized I had been stuck in a loop, working, sacrificing, hoping for recognition that never came. Maybe this was my chance to break free. 2 days later I bumped into Paula at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me. "You haven't been answering emails," she said. I smiled. "I'm not part of the team anymore." She blinked, clearly caught off guard. "But we need you. You know how everything works." I shrugged. "You wanted the role. You've got it." She didn't reply, just nodded and walked away. That night I got a call from Mom. She asked if I'd reconsider. Said Paula was still learning. I listened quietly. Then said, "She's the heir, remember?" Mom sighed. "You're being stubborn." I didn't argue. I just said goodbye. I started spending more time outside. I visited old friends I hadn't seen in years. I read books I'd been meaning to finish. I cooked meals from scratch. Slowly I began to feel like myself again. Someone outside the office, someone with a life beyond spreadsheets and deadlines. But the guilt lingered. I worried about the clients, the staff, the systems I'd built. I wondered if they were falling apart. I wondered if Paula was drowning. But I didn't reach out. I had made my choice. One morning I got a text from Ravi. "Things are messy," he wrote. "Paula's overwhelmed." I stared at the message, then deleted it. I wasn't going back. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and started drafting a new business idea. Something small. Something mine. The morning was quiet. I had just finished folding laundry when my phone rang. Dad's name lit up the screen. I hadn't heard from him since the night they handed Paula the business. I answered, expecting formality. Instead, his voice cracked. "They're threatening to leave," he said. No hello. No build-up. Just panic. I didn't need to ask who. Our biggest client, the one I'd spent years building trust with, was pulling away. "Paula tried to change the terms," he added, almost whispering. "They're furious." I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the floor. "Let Paula handle it," I said. My voice was calm, almost detached. He paused. I could hear him breathing, waiting for me to offer a solution. I didn't. He hung up without another word. That was the last time he called me. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. 2 days later, I heard the client had officially pulled out. The contract was terminated. No negotiation. No second chance. It was a clean break. I knew what that meant. Word would spread. And it did. Fast. Within a week, smaller clients started asking questions. Emails poured in. Staff grew restless. Paula tried to hold meetings, but her confidence cracked. She stumbled through presentations, misquoted figures, and brushed off concerns with vague promises. I watched it all unfold from a distance. Ravi showed up at my door the following Friday. He looked worn down, shirt untucked, eyes heavy. "It's chaos," he said, stepping inside without waiting. "No one knows what's going on. Paula's making decisions that don't make sense. We lost 2 more clients this morning." I poured him tea the same way I used to during late-night strategy sessions. He leaned forward. "You need to come back." I shook my head. "I'm not going back," I said. "Not like this." He didn't argue. He just looked at me, waiting. I gave him a few quiet tips. Names of vendors who could help, reminders about renewal dates, a suggestion to check the client retention dashboard. He nodded, grateful. But I wasn't ready to return. Not yet. That weekend I got a call from Mom. She invited me over for tea. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. I went, more out of curiosity than obligation. She had set the table like old times. China cups, lemon slices, shortbread cookies. She poured carefully, then sat across from me. "Paula's overwhelmed," she said. "She's trying, but it's a lot." I stirred my tea slowly. "She's the heir, remember?" I said, keeping my voice even. Mom didn't reply. She just stared at her cup, the silence stretching between us like a wall. I looked around the room. The same family photos lined the shelves. One of me and Dad at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. One of Paula at her graduation. Everything looked unchanged, but it felt different. Like the warmth had drained out. I left without finishing my tea. The following week I started hearing numbers. Not from the books, I didn't have access anymore, but through whispers. Vendors started pulling back. Staff began updating their resumes. Paula hired consultants, outsiders who didn't understand our niche. They suggested flashy changes, expensive campaigns, and restructuring plans that ignored our core clients. Expenses ballooned. The tone of the company shifted. It wasn't the place I had built. It was something else, something hollow. I ran into one of our junior staffers at the grocery store. She looked nervous, glancing around like she didn't want to be seen. "Are you coming back?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "Not right now." She nodded, biting her lip. "It's not the same without you." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Later that night I got a message from Ravi. "They're talking about selling part of the company," he wrote. "Paula's overwhelmed. Dad's frustrated. No one knows what to do." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't flinch. I didn't reply. Instead I went for a walk. The air was crisp, the sky streaked with orange. I passed the old bookstore where I used to stop after work. The owner waved. I waved back. Life outside the company felt quieter, simpler. I had spent so long inside that bubble I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe. I stopped at a bench and sat down. A couple walked by, laughing. A dog barked in the distance. I thought about the years I'd spent fixing problems, smoothing over mistakes, carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. I thought about how easily they had handed it all to Paula, and how quickly it was falling apart. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. The next morning I got another call. This time from one of our longtime vendors. "We're reconsidering our partnership," he said. "Things feel unstable." I listened, nodded, thanked him for the honesty. He paused. "If you ever start something new, let us know." I smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." That afternoon I cleaned out the last drawer in my home office. Old receipts, client notes, scribbled ideas for campaigns that never launched. I boxed them up, labeled them archive, and slid them into the closet. It felt final, but also freeing. I didn't check the company website. I didn't ask about meetings. I didn't follow up with Ravi. I let it all unfold without me. And for the first time in years I slept through the night. The night I slept through without waking felt like a small victory. No dreams, no racing thoughts, no imaginary boardroom arguments. Just silence. I woke up rested, made tea, and sat by the window as the city stirred to life. That morning, I knew I was done waiting for them to realize what they'd lost. I wasn't going back. But I wasn't going to disappear either. I reached out to a firm I'd quietly admired for years. They were technically a competitor, but we'd always had mutual respect. Their founder, Anika, had once told me at a conference, "If you ever want to build something that lasts, come talk to me." So I did. We met at a quiet cafe tucked behind a bookstore, neutral ground. She listened as I laid it out. 3 major clients, all built on relationships I had nurtured personally. I wasn't asking for money. I didn't want a title. I just wanted a promise. Treat my people well. She nodded without hesitation. "Done," she said. "And if you ever want a seat at the table, it's yours." That was enough. I called Ravi later that afternoon. 3 clients are moving," I said. "I've already spoken to them. They're ready." He didn't ask why. He just said, "What do you need from me?" I gave him a list, names of staff who deserved better, firms that were hiring, places where they'd be valued. Slowly, quietly, the best people began to leave. One by one. No drama. No announcements. Just quiet exits. Paula was left with interns and temp workers. People who didn't know the systems, the clients, the culture. I didn't gloat. I didn't post cryptic quotes online or send smug emails. I just watched from a distance as the foundation cracked. The company started missing deadlines. Clients complained about sloppy service. Vendors pulled out. The silence from my family was deafening. Then Paula called. Her voice was thin, strained. "Can you come in?" she asked. "Just for a day. I need help." I didn't answer right away. I could hear the desperation in her tone. "Please," she added. "I don't know what to do." I agreed to visit. Not to help, but to see. The office felt unfamiliar. The energy was gone. Desks were empty. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and panic. Paula stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes red. "I didn't know it would be this hard," she said. I didn't respond. She looked at me, searching for something, Maybe sympathy, maybe forgiveness. I thought I could handle it, she whispered. I thought I was ready. I stepped closer, looked around the room, then back at her. You wanted the crown, I said. Wear it. She cried. I didn't comfort her. I walked out without looking back. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address, but I recognized Dad's handwriting immediately. It was short. Just one line. You were right. No apology. No explanation. Just that. I read it twice, then framed it and hung it in my home office. Not out of pride, but as a reminder. A reminder of what I survived. What I built. What I let go. I didn't feel bitter. I felt clear. I started consulting. Small projects. My own pace. I chose clients who respected boundaries, who valued experience over ego. I worked from home, from cafes, from parks. I met people who were building things with heart, not just ambition. I found joy again, in the quiet moments, in the freedom, in the ability to say no. One afternoon, I got a message from Anika. Your people are thriving, she wrote. You did right by them. I smiled. That was all I needed. I didn't check the old company's website. I didn't ask about quarterly reports. I didn't attend industry mixers where Paula might show up. I let them feel my absence. And they did. I ran into one of our former clients at a charity event. He shook my hand, held it a little longer than necessary. We miss you, he said. It's not the same. I thanked him, then introduced him to a young consultant I'd been mentoring. She's sharp, I said. You'll be in good hands. He nodded, trusting me. That was the legacy I wanted. Not a title. Not a plaque. Just quiet respect. One evening I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker. I thought about everything, the late nights, the betrayal, the silence, the exit. I didn't feel angry anymore. Revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was walking away with dignity. It was letting them realize on their own what they had lost. It was building something new, not out of spite but out of strength. And I had.